Good morning, everyone. We're going to give people just one more minute to join us. We know people are probably navigating from their morning meetings and their morning commute, but feel free to drop in the chat your name, your pronouns, the organization you're representing today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And Edmund is still connecting to audio, I see.
I see that. Yeah, but we're gonna go ahead and get started because we only have an hour. It's not that much time. But thank you everyone for joining us this morning for this session on evaluation and data management. My name is Anna. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at AMPT, and we're so excited to be doing this in partnership with our friends at the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation. And today we are hosting our dear friends, Stephen Rosado and Fausto Lopez from the Praxis Institute. And they are going to be taking us through just everything you need to know about the beginnings and details of evaluation and data management this morning. So feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. A little bit more about AMPT in case you don't know about us. So Fausto, if you could go to the next slide. Oh, first of all, stay comfortable, stay engaged with us, stay hydrated. But we want to make sure that you feel comfortable. If you don't want to come off of a video, that's fine. You can use reaction buttons. Make sure to comment in the chat. Raise your hand. Come off of mic if you have any questions. All of these things we encourage you to do. So a little bit more about AMPT in case you don't know about us. We are here committed to strengthening the organizational health and supporting the long-term development of small nonprofits here in Chicago, specifically Black and Latina-led nonprofits who are serving Black and Latina communities. And we are really excited to be really looking forward to significant and sustained investment in Chicago's Black and Latina communities here in the city. And so our purpose is really to amplify your work. We are prioritizing developmental relationships. And so this is just one of the many things that we're able to do. And we look forward to seeing you in many of our other programs coming up. Next slide. So I'm going to leave it off to our friends at the Praxis Institute. Please take it away and take us through all of this incredible information.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Rosado. I am one of the founding partners at the Praxis Institute, working in our strategy and engagement work. And I'm here with my colleague, Fausto Lopez. Fausto, you want to introduce yourself? I know they're going to learn more about us in an activity later, but want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good to be in community with y'all.
Cool. And, just very quickly about our organization, we are an organization that does a lot of different work with different systems, different community-based orgs across the city and nationally, schools, philanthropy, government, etc. And really working, as you see on the slides, just through an approach that's human-centered, around connection, around facilitating compassion, empathy, being creative. And what we're here for today, as we talk through data and evaluation, right, this continuous improvement science, and really leaning into in our mission what that word praxis means, right? Integrating theory and practice. And when we do it and we think about it towards healing-centered and transformative solutions. Lopez, next one. And we do this, in a few ways. These are some of our approaches, our tools of how we do this. We provide capacity building and learning experiences for folks in settings like this, in cohort models that we are able to lead, as well as for systems, as well as for organizations. We provide a lot of coaching to folks, from organizational leaders to direct staff practitioners. We also have a couple of folks on our team with behavioral health backgrounds, so they provide coaching to folks on applying mental health practices and evidence-based practices from the therapeutic world into their work. We lead communities of praxis, where we bring people together to talk about the practice and strategies they're using in their work and kind of learning about best practices and sharing ideas and reflection with one another. Our evaluation strategy is rooted in participatory evaluation. We'll talk more about that shortly. And then we also have a couple of our own proprietary pieces. We have our Institute for Quality Youth Development, which is our professional development series that we have developed and are rolling out around, again, quality youth development and programming for young people, for organizations. What does that look like? As well as our own direct service, social, emotional, arts, and radical community healing. We call it SEARCH. It is our blend of how we approach this work with young people and also with adults, right? But you focus integrating SEL, arts, healing into work with young people to create space for them to make meaning, to explore, to tap into their creative side. And we really lean into the wisdom of the ancestor of Bell Hooks, right? Who has taught us that education as the practice of freedom is not just about liberatory knowledge, it's about a liberatory practice in the classroom, in hallways, and in communities. And so when we enter a space, you know, for us, again, as an organization, there are just some pieces that you can assume anytime you see myself, Fausto, Jessica, Josh, Mimi, anybody who is with our org, you can assume that these are things that we believe to be true. These are our organizational guiding beliefs and assumptions. One, we know that every single person in this community, in our community right now in this space, is wise, powerful, and profoundly interconnected. Two, we know that all human beings have commonalities, including a deep desire to be in healthy relationships. Three, we know that everyone is needed for what they bring. Four, we know that all human beings are holistic. And five, we know that everything we need to make and affect positive change is already here. And these assumptions are derived from and built on the indigenous teachings and traditions and excerpted from a book called Heart of Hope and Circle Forward by Carolyn Boyes Watson and Kay Pranis. Yeah, these are just kind of our guiding assumptions. So we'll get into what we're going to get into for today momentarily. You know, just a couple of quick objectives in our next 45 minutes. Now you can go back, yeah. In our next 45 minutes, 50 minutes that we have left, we're going to just go through some methods and best practices for program evaluation, for storing, managing, and reporting data, and reflect on the importance of applying anti-racist and human-centered design when collecting and sharing data, right? So collecting data with intentionality and without replicating harm. You go next, Lopez. And so let's get us started here. We have, and actually we have a smaller group. So I think we could, if folks are comfortable coming off mute, we put this as a chat box check because we weren't sure how large the group might be. But since we have a little bit of a smaller group, I think we have enough time that we can hear from everybody. Very quickly, just thinking about when's the last time you completed a non-work related survey or gave feedback to a service or a person? When was the last time you did that? And I'll kick us off and go first in the spirit of how we like to facilitate. We are facilitator participants. I had to change my modem. I was having internet issues, and Xfinity contacted me actually and was like, hey, something was up with your internet. We're going to send a technician. The technician basically told me I had a really old modem, and he upgraded me right there on the spot, fixed me, got me all working. And then as he was leaving, he was like, hey, you might get a little text message asking about my service if you wouldn't mind doing that. You know, and I actually shared with him you know, the praxis line of like, we are the people who always ask people to do surveys, so we always do the survey. And so he was very happy to hear that. And then a few minutes later, I got the text message asking me to rate the technician. So that was about a week and a half ago. And I would say that was the last time, and I gave him very high marks because he was super helpful, thorough, and quick, and fun to talk to as well. So that was the last time. Anyone else care to share? When was the last time you completed a survey, gave some feedback, non-work related?
Uber. I always do my Uber surveys because I feel like, I don't know, I always give them tips. And I mean, if they definitely deserved it, but like, you know, always think about like what was good about the ride or not and all that. I always do my Uber surveys.
Uber survey is a good one. Thank you. Go ahead, Edmund.
So my last time might have been a few weeks ago as well. It was just a an Amazon delivery. And the door to the entrance to my apartment building it's kind of funky, so it's a little hard to find sometimes. So anytime anybody delivering something can find the door, I give them some good praise.
Awesome, thank you. I share in that sentiment. We have to change some things in our apartment building as well because deliveries were struggling. How about Crystal, Jeanette, or Becky?
Sure. So recently I gave feedback to my daughter. She manages my website, and so just gave her feedback on what to do, how to make it better, and yeah, how to improve it.
Thanks, Crystal. Keeping it in the family. I love that.
I can go. This is Becky. I recently had to fix something with a financial thing, and the person was really, really helpful and helped me navigate. It was like collecting a receipt I didn't get. And so I don't typically give surveys, but if someone's really good or really bad, I'll wait for that extra minute to give out the survey.
Thank you for that, Becky. And last but not least, Jeanette.
Yes, thank you. So I try to do them as much as I can. So like Amazon, or like even when we're eating, I try to even give them a verbal thank you, just because I'm in the service industry, and it's just really important that when you're in a hurry that you're kind to other people. So I just try to say it right then and there.
I love that real-time feedback. That's actually something that formative in real-time feedback is very important. Last but not least, Lopez, and then you'll take us down the next few pieces.
Well, yeah, it's something with, I think it was a TaskRabbit, again, platform based. You sign up for them, they come and do something real quick. So similar, it was that quick feedback about how they did, and similar, just kind of back to the organization. But yeah, again, welcome everybody. Again, this idea here, right, is that there's so much data, and more, there's just so many ways of gathering that data. Crystal, you were talking about that in-person one. Okay, so sentiment data, one-on-one is good, but imagine back to when we start talking about methods, you talk to 70 people, that's a lot of insights, right? Or you get 70 people to give you insights on the website. It's one thing to get, the first thing that we're already leading with is that technology is catching up with us about how we collect data, right? And to stay at the pulse of things. But it doesn't mean that doesn't perplex how we then, again, not all of us could be Uber, not all of us can be, Grubhubs, or have, these apps or ways. But again, it's about already from the get-go challenging us in this evaluative space. Not only, again, what we do with the data once we have it, but again, it's already, how do we collect it? Because right, I'm going to age myself, right? We're coming so back from, doing surveys in person, in hand, and then somebody having to get onto a system and type that in, and then somebody then eventually figure out what the data is telling us, right? Well, again, we're already saying that lag is a challenge, but more and more, both technology and different things within our cultures of our organizations, we have to challenge ourselves to be much more at the pulse of things. Because the data lag, especially if somebody comes and gives you a report from a year ago, right, Crystal, then how much can we, again, it's still going to be valuable information, but a lot of our work is so much about being at the pulse. We need to figure out how to get those better, quick connections, quick insights from our end user, whoever your end user is, so that then that helps inform those larger summative, ongoing things that you're collecting data on, especially if you're in the world of like emotions, or again, working with like folks about how they are experiencing something, even the different ways that we present that to them. Obviously, we all know the Uber one, right? It's like right away, like the Uber one is interesting to me because it's like, that was also part of their culture, where it's right, Crystal, we're in the back seat, and even before we got out of the car, they're like, give me a 5. Don't forget to give me a 5. Don't forget to do it, right? That's another part of all of this evaluative thing. It's about making sure that the person who's going to then take that time, to Jeanette's point, right? It takes time, and you want to do it. is that then you prioritize why you're giving them that insight. And we all, back to especially Uber, because when we're interacting with that, we do want our next ride to be more safe, right away, not in a month, right, Crystal? Not in 2 years do we want a better experience with the thing that we're doing, or our food, or Chat GPT, because even AI really wants to know right away, did this hit, did this not hit, because it helps refine it quickly, right, the next output. But we need all those different staggered ways, because again, depending on what you're working on, and we'll talk about that in a second, again, we're all going to be challenged to not know how we did it in the past, but how we're trying to make it more current and stay more current with, again, how we get these data faster, how we present these data out to people then also once we have those data. But we'll talk about that, or you're going to talk about that right now. So, all right, Stephen, I got off my pulpit here. Let's get them talking about what they're working on so that we can bring some context to the convo.
Yeah, we're gonna actually give you a chance to connect with some of the folks in the space here. So we're gonna give you probably maybe closer to 7 minutes on the breakout room, but give you about 7 minutes or so to just share and discuss around these two questions. One, what is the primary purpose of your data management and evaluation approach, right? So when you think about how you are currently undertaking data management, data collection, evaluation strategies, what purpose do they serve? We provided a couple examples to kind of start the conversation for you. For example, do they serve the purpose of compliance and monitoring for reporting for your funders, right? Is that the primary reason why you collect data and do evaluation? Is just because we have to be compliant, we're monitored, we're being held to these deliverables, and so we have to report out on it? Is it for internal research and planning because you want to continue to improve program, service delivery, et cetera, and you need data to be able to do that and inform that? Is it both? Is it another example that isn't listed, right? So just thinking about what is the primary purpose of your data management evaluation approach, and then thinking about your current challenges that you're facing with your evaluation activities, your strategies or initiatives. What might they be? Is it again, an example might be maybe that there's not a dedicated person for it, right? That's a challenge right there. So if there's not a dedicated person helping manage it, right, then who is ultimately responsible, right? So we're going to give you all some time to talk about that. I have it set up in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back in about 7 or so minutes. Any questions from the group? I'm also going to put the questions in the chat for everybody right now so that you can have them when you go out into the breakout room. But any questions in the meantime? All right, cool. Then I will go ahead and open these rooms and
those nuances, exactly. I'll let that go. You know, everybody's got different challenges, different, may potentially even just different hurdles that they just, you know, got over, and then there's another hill and another thing in this evaluative space, right? We always say, tell me, Crystal, that you have a data collection activity that you're trying to do, and then if it's successful, then what are you going to do, right? Because now you're sitting on all those data. Somebody's got to go through it. Somebody's got to figure it out, right? So sometimes success is what's going to really blow our minds even more than just even trying to launch something. But again, let's hear a little bit about what y'all were talking about in the room. That would be helpful, because then we can bring some, like I said, context to the conversation.
Well, in our room, if I may,
Yes, please.
so we were, I guess, what the biggest kind of theme that we had was getting started with data collection. So I know specifically the organization I work for, like everybody is relatively new. The org was in operation for has been in operation for a little over 5 years, but the leaders prior to us that came in now didn't collect any data, mainly because they didn't have to. They just had funding from private sources. It was a kind of close-knit little thing that they had, and so now that everybody's new coming in, we don't have that kind of wealth bucket to dip into. So our we know we have to go out to the public sector to try to get some funds, and so we're basically at the beginning of trying to figure out how to collect what we need to collect for funding purposes.
So it's just starting with a process is what I heard there, right? Just even starting literally from scratch, Edmund, right? It's just like we need to start and even just develop our process, right? Because
Absolutely.
okay.
Well,
Cool.
and what you have there too, I mean, before somebody else comes in too, is a great example of why sometimes, even though we know it's going to take a lot of work, back to like who prioritizes you, who's asking you to report back or to collect any data, right? As you said before, when it's insular and they're just like, nah, it's cool, we trust on what y'all are doing, that's fine for a little while. But then when you want to expand, when you want to sustain, when someone, we always say, right, the wins the lottery scenario, you know, Edmund, who had all those connections, you know, wins the lottery, they're gone. All right, now Steven comes in and is like, we all start perpetually this non-for-profit cycle of starting from scratch because we didn't put a little bit of sustainability time in so that somebody can at least inherit something and not always have to start always from the get-go. But that reset button is real in our work for sure. So I hear you, and definitely we'll try to bring some of that. Anybody else want to talk about, you know, what they were talking with their group about?
Similarly talked about same thing, is that in the past there wasn't a person to collect the data, and so now being charged with collecting the data, disseminating it. And so we talked about a challenge is that sometimes people aren't really filling out survey data, and so how do we capture that in the moment at that point of time while the event or something is happening at the end, thinking about plus deltas as being data, thinking about structuring the surveys in the actual event and things like that so that we can actually get the data.
Oh, nugget right there. Again, some of it is going to be back to analyzing all types of things in this evaluative space, right? But 100% back to, we all can spend a lot of time coordinating, trying to get people to do a survey. Surveys are important, but more and more, that's almost like the low-hanging fruit on getting feedback, because you could do it, but sometimes, like I said, you send it out, you know, there were 100 people and you get 3 responses. Then you're spending more time coordinating and trying to get the data versus, exactly, depending on what we're talking about, similar to that conversation before, Uber doesn't send you, right, Anna, like they don't send it to you a week later. How was your experience? You know, it's do it right now. They either make the tweaks or they don't, or whatever that culture, and even in your brain of bi-directionality, like they're listening to me, at least that function creates there, even if they don't, right? Or they give you a rating or whatever's happening that helps you right there in the moment, and just trying to figure out how we get there. But it's not easy. I'm with you, Crystal.
Cool. Let's why don't we get into some of the strategy piece, because I know we had a lot packed in this hour, so we want to make sure to get into some of the data strategy piece and tools we got for y'all. But thank y'all for sharing. And as we're here as well, we are also very active chat box users. So if something comes to mind and you want to share in the chat box, one of us is always we're both always paying attention, and one of us will always flag it, I should say, in the chat box. So if you have a question, thought, feedback, you know, please feel free to share there.
And so, yeah, and in this, yeah, please, obviously, we're going to be, again, a lot of this is about preparing ourselves within what I would say is like the culture around research, evaluation, data, right? Because it really has to be a cultural shift. That's what we see. You have to kind of be all in, because mostly if you're sitting around on the peripheries, you're going to be just more and more frustrated, right? Point people, you're going to hear us kind of provide like best practices, but by no means is it ever like, ooh, this is what you got to go do, right? Because again, you have all different organizational cultures, goals, priorities, revenue streams. The idea here is that's why we start with at least a level setting with the mindset, right? So we all know that this is complex work, that, you know, you're doing that work, but a lot of it is to inform planning, very much like Edmund brought up. You know, it's going to help us just along the way, but most of the time we all inherit the second graph, right? It is gnarly, it is moving, it's fluid, back to why it's sometimes those summative old school ways of data are not aligned to those curves, you know, much more aligned to that linear way, but our work is not linear. But again, we have to kind of figure out a mixed way of making that work And so that puts all of this can drive what we do. Okay, so a lot in the work, we frame that mostly for our sanity, is this idea of continuous improvement. Because if not, right, back to psychology, if we are constantly not having success on it, right, then our psychology, even within our culture, start dipping, right? Like, but again, you have to frame it as complex work, as a complex even task to do this development, implementation, evaluation. It's about being more nimble. So you have to think about that and bring not only yourself to that, I don't know how you conjugate nimble, to that kind of level of fluidity, you know, but then on top of that, all of the culture or the folks within your organization to also know that, yo, this is not about being stagnant and figuring it out later or when we get to it. Like, we all have to commit, and thus, what are the strategies to do that? And let's just look, and how do we operationalize it, right? So again, one of the biggest things that we can say about anybody's culture is that it could always be more participatory. Now, again, this is already a challenge because you're like, yo, I was already having a hard time with the traditional way of collecting feedback and data. Well, in a way, that's why this gets you back to that pulse. So the closer you can get back to that event scenario, for sure. Again, a week later, it's good that you're ready to do it, or even a day later, but within, for sure, they're participating, they're interacting, and that's already going to bring better quality data to your situation because you're not asking their memory about how it went. It's more like in the moment telling you, especially because depending on what you're trying to evaluate, it'll really get you to that place. Obviously, accountability, back to Edmund, like, again, if you have data, some of it for a long time has been the services we provide. Yo, this is what we got. You know, in a way, it's back to like, we didn't want to promote bidirectionality because it was like, hey, this is what you receive. And in a way, we don't necessarily need that feedback loop, but we're in a different place, right? So the idea there of accountability, making sure that you really know whether or not you're meeting your outcomes, or at least you're moving towards your outcomes, can help you figure out what to do next internally, but definitely externally, because then, you know, back to like bringing in people to support you in that space, or depending on what you're dealing with. And obviously ongoing opportunities for engaging all of your different partners or constituents to have that ongoing determining of need. Because if you keep hearing it, then you want to make those changes right away. If the car is dirty, you know, right, they're going to hear that, and then you want to change that right away, not again for 7 or 10 more different people. So again, it's about whether, again, determining needs and taking direct action. Again, the research is very clear. You need to put people in a space of collaboration with these data. The more it's only static, and thus like, hey, fill this out, and there's no, hey, what are you doing this, or can you bring some life to the data, the more those data will be taken for granted, and thus people potentially will not either respond to surveys or not give you insights because they don't see that collaborative way of doing it. And this is definitely at the staff level too. Once you actually have data, you've got to wrap their brain around what is the data telling us, so that it doesn't just become this task that needs to be done. And let the practice inform the data. And how do you do that? You do that through ongoing reflection of both the hard numbers, those quant numbers, and those qualitative, the insights, all those comments, all those all the maybe different testimonials that might come out of the different work that you do. Question there is how you capture them, but the idea is you have to push for that being done because it should inform the practice part. At the end of the day, it's always tough, difficult work. So the way that we always frame it, again, to really help everybody develop that culture of improvement, is you have to chip away at the mindset, and thus just say that at the, you know, you do your best until you know better, collect some data, you experience what's going on, and then as soon as you know better, you do better. So again, you want to make it more and more fluid. That's the idea of this mindset shift or challenge to adapt to this mindset. All right, now let's take a second here. Told you, practice, research, practice. Look at the traditional perspective category. I want you to think about, again, the spaces that you are either in or the services you're providing. Thinking always about how we want to shift from traditional perspective or mindsets to a more transformative perspective. And again, a lot of our work fundamentally in services will be transactional. You're giving them. The question here is, how can you get it to be more cooperative? If you feel at any point around that, again, some of it is judgment based. Again, a lot of our need data is always going to be a bit judgmental. The folks who collect those data are inherently looking at it or pathologizing a lot of time those data. They're only collecting it to show a problem. Again, and a lot of us are funded to solve those problems. But at our end, we need to go from not being judgmental about those data or biased about like why those, versus curious about why that's happening. And thus, where is our place to help whatever way you're helping. Again, a lot of times it's challenging the power dynamics of traditional perspectives versus then again, that's where collaboration and being clearer, more transparent about what is happening can always push you to be more transformative. Again, we move from, again, those individual metrics that at times really do put us at a deficit place to a more complex, holistic environmental perspective that then gives us different data points, similar to, again, like ACEs when you're working with young people or adverse childhood experiences. What is going on that is impacting that young person? There's a lot of different data that then puts us when we think about things more ecologically, not just in a, ooh, that young person or that person needs this. What else is happening? And you can see yourself again, just running through this. This is always about checking yourself in your place. And at the last one, it becomes the biggest one because it really is. Traditional perspective has always been very deficit based. And we need to shift all of our data, all of our interpretation of our data, how we collect the data to be more asset based. How you do that, again, a lot of folks will push that you want to make sure that you are, again, are nimble about both what you're collecting and how you're thinking about those collection of data. So again, these plan, do, study acts have been tried and tested. It's evidence-based, right, to how you should do it. It just needs to take a bit of change about an ongoing inquiry, data-driven. What are those data? The challenge here is sometimes the data that you've been collecting is not going to be those data. You got to sit around, collaborate, and think, what is the pulse data that you can collect that might help you with those larger data sets that we'll talk about in a second. Again, it's a lot of words, but it goes back to like the research is very clear that this is where we need to move, regardless of where you find yourself right now or how you think about your data culture. Everything in the improvement science world, especially within social services, really push us to be more collaborative, push more and more the capacity like y'all are doing right now by joining this, right? Just getting in different opportunities for capacity building for you and your staff or all your different stakeholders. This idea of being more flexible and adaptive, because again, the rigidity of old data that was just like, ooh, again, that was from either last year or we did that at the beginning and now we're looking at it at the end and it was 6 months ago. We need to think about more flexibility, adaptability, thus lead with relevance. How is this data going to help me right away? And even if it complexes me right now, we need to make those shifts so that we can push that ongoing reflection, so we can adapt it and learn and change, so that we just don't always assume that we're doing, that everybody likes our food, right? We have to ask the people whether or not they actually liked our food. All right, Stephen, come on in.
Sorry. So just wanted us to just have a few questions here for the group. Any one of these questions that might be resonating with you, just thinking about your process. And some of you might have already reflected on this in the breakout. We'll stay in the large group for this, but any of these 3 questions that are coming to mind, if there's any that you want to share, just some thoughts around thinking, one, about the power dynamics that exist in your evaluation process and how they might impact your evaluation, whether that dynamic is between you and the funder or between you and the communities you're serving, right? What power dynamic might exist? Who are the beneficiaries of your evaluation process? And then how are you, or how do we engage community members in an evaluation process with dignity and integrity rather than applying a deficit mindset? So would love to hear from the group around any of these questions that are coming to mind for you, anything you would like to share in response to this as you think through your process. Always feel free to use the chat box as well. Go ahead, Edmund. Just saw you come off.
Yeah, I can jump in there for a second. I guess the first question that jumped out at me was who are the beneficiaries of our evaluation process. So any time we think about beneficiaries, we definitely are participant centered. And so basically what the kind of thought process behind why we need to collect this data, of course, it's to get more funding, but that funding is ultimately to put us in a better position to give more to our participants. So, and of course, the third part comes in. Well, I didn't touch on the second part. But so about the community members, we're always looking to, because we have our stuff on social media and stuff like that. So we always look to involve the community and kind of inform them about not just what we do, but why what we do is important to the community as a whole. So I mean, I guess overall we try to think about all of those things, but ultimately to the end point of being able to better serve the folks we service.
Thank you for that, man. So yeah, so kind of just summarizing, you all of these pieces, as you just kind of said there at the end, right, or at the end about being better and being able to better serve the folks you service. And I love just kind of some of the examples you shared, even about integrating community in different ways and thinking about how even, that example of social media, being really good as thinking about, again, another way that you can kind of evaluate your program, evaluate the impact, right, and get people to speak to what that looks like, right, and tell that story in a number of ways. That is a form of documenting that work. I'm going to move us along because I do want us to get through a couple of more pieces before we wrap up here. So just, again, some considerations for evaluation, right? These photos, what they represent, right? When we think about, we're going to get into just some methodology and purpose pieces momentarily. Well, when you see these photos, right, when we think about what we're doing here, when we're conducting evaluation or for folks conducting research, right, it's really thinking about that lab setting in a way, right? So much of this is derived from what we know happens in the world of science, right? Social science, right? Think about what we call social science and where research and evaluation tends to live. It derives, right, from scientific method, scientific inquiry, which, right, going back to our high school or grade school science classes, right, we know involves a hypothesis, right, and a working theory of what's going to happen, and probably a control group, and all these very in a lab controlled, tried and tested measures that now we are trying to use to replicate, right, in human settings, right, and with people. And we know that people are much more complex than what we have in a science-controlled lab, right? So taking these lab-based settings and say, we're going to use these now to study people or to evaluate people or to collect data is really interesting when you think about it, right? That approach. And as you see our friend in the White Tower, it's always, so for so long done by academics who are disconnected from the community, right? They're disconnected from the work, right? So they're the people who are often doing the evaluation, doing the research, collecting the data, but they don't have a connection or an understanding of the communities that they're doing that work around. And then you get, kind of a replication of that deficit model over and over, which leads a group like Chicago Beyond to produce a very useful tool for researchers and data collectors and evaluators. Their tool is called Why Am I Always Being Researched? You can check it out. We'll actually make sure Anna to send you the PDF too, if you want to send for the group. But it's a really great tool for you to just think through your process and your considerations as an organization when you're collecting data. How are you doing it in a way that is not just replicating harmful institutions of the past that have done this work, that have previously done this work? Lopez, next slide. Yeah, I found the White Tower. That was That was helpful. And then we also know that data is useless, right, without context, right? So just another consideration, right? Anytime we look at the black and white data of pieces, right? Anytime we look at the spreadsheet, there's a story, there are people, right, behind those data points. There's context to why maybe your Uber ride is a 3-star instead of 5-star, right? Maybe the Uber driver actually was no different than the last 10 Uber drivers, but you had a difficult phone call or conversation before you got in that Uber and you weren't already in a good mood to begin with, right? And then the Uber driver did one minor thing that you normally would not care about, but because you were not in the mood that day, right? Or because you were in a mood, I should say, that day, you know, gave them 3 stars instead of 5, right? So again, data is useless without context. And we want to always remember that there's context to these pieces as well. Yeah, it's not letting me
And
control.
and one of the things too here, depending on what type of data you're collecting, it's also the challenge already, especially in these spaces, to not just always live in how are we going to collect the data. Okay, now we have the data, we reported it to our funders, so we got loot. But again, we need to still, and again, because all of those we're deliverable driven. But at the end of the day, it's also making sure that we prioritize in our organizational culture to then to bring more context to it, bring more constituents to like what is going on. But again, it is always another challenge. So again, we say that as a lot of this is the challenge is to get more context out of those data or bring more of that qualitative work into your data, depending on how you are in your data culture right now.
Yeah, and we're gonna go. You can go to the next one. We're gonna get into some just quick methodology of how we do that data collection work, right? And so, you know, in the chat box, if you could please share one quantitative data point about yourself, and you can see on the screen a couple quantitative data points, right? Quantitative, mean having a numerical value to it, right? For Fausto and I. So side by side, you could see our age, the years that we were respectively born, our heights, our shoe sizes and weights. We both have 2 siblings. Fausto is in the middle. I have 2 younger siblings. I have no pets. Fausto has 2 dogs. Fausto owns over 100 plants, and I own around 25 or so. So again, just one quantitative data point for yourself. You could use our examples around your age, your height, any familial relationships, or anything else, right? If you want to say, if your quantitative data point is, I graduated from high school in 2012, that could be your quantitative data point, right? But just one kind of point for yourself. Just go ahead and throw it in the chat. Any quantitative data point that comes to mind that is about yourself. It could be your age if you want to keep it as basic as that, your height, any piece. All right, so Crystal is also in the 2-dog gang with Fausto. Thank you, Crystal. 85 baby. Me and Anna here. They were like a few weeks apart, if I remember correctly, right? Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Any other quant data from our friends about yourselves? 78. Thank you, Augie. Cool. So as y'all are doing that, Gen Zer, thank you, Jeanette. So Gen Zer, Fausto, we go into the next one.
Oh,
So Gen Zer, and then as we go into the next one, the same questions can also yield qualitative data. So rather than our year, right, we're now talking about our zodiac signs, right? Fausto is a Virgo to the 10th degree, and I'm an extreme Aries, right? It balances out. Fausto, according to the science, is exactly the height of an average male, which means I am slightly above the height of an average male. Fausto loves sneakers. I'm like very particular. I only really wear like 3 brands. And honestly, we can have a separate convo about how I finally got Fausto after like 12 years to start wearing Nikes recently. Fausto's a vegetarian, right? That I enjoy cooking. It relaxes me. Fausto's siblings are Diana and Patricia. My siblings are Ariel and Katie. These are Fausto's dogs on the screen. They're also the HR directors of the Praxis Institute, Zazie and Bijou. I have 0 pets. I actually live in a building that doesn't allow you to have pets. And then Fausto used to own a flower shop, which is why he owns over 100 plants, and his house looks like Jumanji if you ever go there. I struggle with taking care of plants, which is why I only own roughly 25, but my partner does a really great job. She is awesome at making sure that we have a good schedule for watering and taking care of plants. And now my plant life is thriving like it never has before. So same data points, right? One qualitative data point about yourself. Since we're up on time, close to time, actually, let's go to the next one, Lopez, because I think the next slide will actually give us a nice side by side, right? Again, of asking kind of, you get it, of breaking down how qualitative and quantitative, right, questions can be used to get to similar results, right? Or to get to different, right, but to ask similar questions, right? You could have, instead of asking, the purpose being the why, it could be, how many or how much, right? What kind of data type is represented in that? What is the approach for getting that data, right? Qualitative data is observational and interpreting, right? I have observed and interpreted over many years that I cannot take care of plants, right? So there's not, but I can measure that so far now we have around 25, and that is thanks to my partner, right? And then the way that it's analysis, right? So how we bring humanity into this work, as Fausto just shared right in the chat, right? So qualitative data, we're grouping around common themes. We're not doing a statistical analysis, but rather we're looking for themes and common trends. Versus quantitative, you will likely run that through some sort of software, through some sort of algorithm analysis, right, to get a statistical measure. But again, the idea being that we can bring some humanity with the qualitative end to black and white quantitative data. And with quantitative data, we could bring some numerical value to some of the qualitative pieces, right? Those human aspects, right? So those same question types, right? But getting to two different results in two different structures. Oh. Did you, my bad, I'll reshare. Lopez's screen, I think, just crashed. Let me get my deck back up. And so, oh, there you go. So anywho, so then when we think about this, just again, as we're closing out the purpose of this very quickly, this is just, again, the action research kind of the why we want to involve our stakeholders, our constituents in this work, right? It's just by doing this, it really is a way for us to increase the validity and the usefulness of what we're finding, right? When you want to get your people into research, your constituents, the people you're serving, it increases the validity. Again, when you want to invest in research and evaluation, you want to understand what the difference is between the two. You all will have these slides, so you'll have this for reference, which is, again, the side by side of if you're conducting, is what you're doing around research purposes, right? Or is your data collection for evaluation purposes? Again, coming back to our earlier question, is it for external reporting or internal program growth, right? So these are some of the ways that you could differentiate the two. And then thinking about the data collection, the actual data collection and what it looks like, right? All these pieces on the left are strategies for data collection. There's the document review, right? Of historical and internal documents. There's the lit review. There's the needs assessment, surveys, interviews, focus groups, and observations. These are all different forms of data collection. It's always helpful to have multiple ways of collecting data, because when you have multiple methods for collecting data, you can triangulate data to make an assessment, right? You cannot, it's really hard if all of your data is only based on the survey to then have, an insight that that you could glean from just the survey information, right? But having the survey plus the interview plus the doc review, right, allows you to triangulate different data sources to then be able to produce a research project or an evaluation plan or report, or to develop your organizational logic models, so on and so forth. Lopez, I know we're up on time. You want to talk really quickly about your big data friend?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is what we come in here. It's back to, like, if we work towards success and you understand why you're doing it, either for research or evaluation. Again, all of these areas are going to be the things that are going to perplex you along the way, and that you have to go back to, you have to plan for. So again, it's like why you're doing it, definitely how you're collecting it, and how you're, again, where is it living, right? And then more and more that storage one becomes a huge one, right, around data security, different ways of thinking. But again, you have to either graduate to that. And again, a lot of the systems and technology are already safeguarding that. But the question there at some point is also just, making sure that that becomes a kind of one of the first things that you look to do, which includes the resources either around a centralized person, an evaluation team, some type of external expert, or again, at least a platform that is secure, and that's at least something that you can really challenge yourself to look into, because again, once you start collecting those data or have those data, some of that is definitely sensitive. Always be careful about the volume. The volume part, about depending on why you want to research or evaluate, becomes back to sometimes a subset of people informed by bigger data sets is going to give you more insights than, hey, let's do another survey or figure out another way of collecting those data. And obviously, actually, back to Edmund's point, sometimes the research initial is going to be back to that document review. What data is out there, right, that other folks are collecting or investigating that then we're going to align to then either say, look, this is why we're asking these questions so that we can then have comparisons, right? So the idea here is this more data, more problems at times. So it's really about making sure that you have, again, the right data and that you're using either some of your initial opportunities with your group or your evaluation team, or maybe you're an evaluation team of one, to really just make sure that you're reflective about how much you want to complicate your big data issues, right? Because sometimes it might be better to pare it back.
Thank you for that, Lopez. And that's a perfect close for us. We have these questions, but again, you will have, these are meant to be our closing just to take home, right? We could pack in this for an hour. And so you all will have this deck and these closing considerations that we could say, thank you, Augie, for that feedback. I'm glad that the space was useful, because actually what Edmund was just sharing earlier and was, you know, around just working through having to create the process, right? And that it seems like you're affirming that you and Edmund, you know, are starting to just really go down this path of even setting up your process for data collection evaluation in your organization. And so here are some, like, I would say, some good guiding questions to get yourself started as you think through that, and to help think through your strategy work moving forward. Thank y'all for your time. Anna, I know we're a couple minutes over, so I'm gonna give it right back to you now. Thank y'all.
Oh no, thank you so much, Stephen and Fausto. This was so wonderful, as always. So grateful for you all. And yeah, I'm going to send out the slides and also this recording, so you will all be able to access it.